Welcome back to this tutorial series on working with the True32 website template. This video tutorial will be about editing elements with the customizer of our website. So if we come here to the customizer, so let me just back up here so I can show you. I mean, we've gone over this multiple times, but I'd like to make sure you understand where we're getting to this. To get to the customizer, we come to Appearance and Customize. And you need to wait a second when this thing's loading, because it does, you see it dropped in the last two there, so if you go clicking too soon it'll go where you didn't want to go. So let it finish before you go clicking around. But once you're here, let's just literally go top to bottom. This may end up being a little bit longer session than most of the others, because we do need to cover all of these except for this one. I'm going to cover that in a separate video, but I do want to cover all the rest of them. So let's start with the presets, and basically this is kind of like a theme. So we have it set to the default. If we go the default dark, you'll see the whole website will change. We've got a black header, and basically we just have dozens of defaults for header, footer, totally different than what we're using now. I don't see any value in these. I like to kind of style this stuff myself, so I like to start with the default and then style all these things myself without having those messing with my stuff. So then we come to the general, and so in the general we have layout. Typically you would not mess with this, but what it does, so this is basically saying that I want all of my pages to be full width. I don't want them to be some portion of the screen like an old HTML site. I want it to fill the screen, and one of my screens is 32 inches wide, and all of these websites fill that 32 inches. But then I've told it that the content, so this page is full width all the way. If I'm on a 32-inch screen, I'm seeing all of this to the edges of a 32-inch screen. But if I'm on one of these screens, so that's every page past home, you know, about, team, plant tours, system, process, any of these galleries of the contact, where I have this wood background, then the wood background is full, but this is considered the content. And so this content portion here is limited to this 1000, and I believe that's 58. And you can type anything you want, or you can slide the bar. And so some people end up with enough navigation items that they need that to slip on past the width of the center portion. So you can see if we look at this page that it's even inside of it a little bit. So it probably could go even a little more if you wanted to try to line that up, be a little bit bigger than 1058. But it could ease on out here, and most screens would definitely allow for that. So you're certainly welcome to play with that if you want. But I keep it somewhere close to aligning with that content area. This actually says the content width, but the content of those particular boxes are controlled by the builder's modules. Then scroll to the bottom is enabled. So what that means is if we're here and we're scrolling down one of these long pages, you see this little up caret showed up here, and you have to go down. It's not there for a little ways, but then it'll show up, and if the page is short enough it won't show up. But then, so let's say you were at the very bottom, instead of having to scroll all the way to the back to the top, you just click on that, it takes you all the way back to the top. So that's enabled, and then you should never mess with this, but this is the type of CSS framework we're using. These are some fonts that we have available to us. These breakpoints are all about the theme and what happens when you get on a mobile device or a smaller device. So we're saying on these medium, like an iPad, we want the breakpoint to be at 992, and on a phone we want it to be at 768. And that's just a behavior for the website. And if you want to research that some more, you're certainly welcome to do that. There's a lot to this stuff, and we don't have time to go into all those details. So then the background, and so we've just got the background set to a very light gray. We don't want to use the background image here for all of the pages, because we don't want that wood grain behind this. We just want it on certain pages, so we're not going to use that feature to be on every row that we ever drop, and we may not want it on some pages. So here we are, but we're at our accent colors, and so we see now we have the maroon or burgundy color, and then I've got the gold color, the hover color. Now these are accent colors, so these are reversed up here in the navigation, but you know, some of the places we'll see that the primary color will be this burgundy, and then the hover color will be gold. For the navigation, we've got it set to several different things. So down here I've got the primary color is the gold color, and then the hover color is this teal color, and up here I've got the primary color is this gold, and this is what you're on. So this is the same thing as the hover. This happens to be the page we're on. That's what that does. Then you have headings, and so headings are all the big H1, H2, H3. So this is not using any of them. I probably is using H1, but I'm styling it in the box itself because there's only 3 of them. So heading is basically setting the color. You don't have a ton of control here, but this is similar to CSS. If I do it here, I'm doing it everywhere. So I want you to use these areas. I don't want you to ignore them, but we are doing some additional stuff with these in CSS because basically I have one color. So H1, H2, all the way through H6, every one of them are this color, and I don't want to do that. Some of them I want white, some of them I want gold. So we override it with CSS, and I'll show you that when we get to the CSS video. But this is choosing the font weight, and again, it gets overwritten by either CSS or locally in the modules, but this is the default where it starts. And so if you have a module you've said use the default, that's what it's going to use. And then the text, this is the text throughout the website. So if we go to one of these pages, all of this text right now is this burgundy color. It kind of looks black on the screen, but it's that burgundy color. And it's this same font and the same weight, and some fonts don't have multiple weights, and if they don't, you'll just see normal. But if they have multiple weights, you'll see bold and thin and different options for that. And then the font size, and again, you can use the slider or type in the number, but the font on all these pages is 18 currently, and literally if you change it here, if we change this, I'll change it significantly so it will change it on the page. I'm going to publish it so we can look at other pages and refresh. And there it is. And so that's a little too big for a website. We really don't want text that big, but you see how it is instant. As soon as you publish it, you can go look at it. And then you have your line height, and we have that throughout. So then buttons. So one of your options for buttons is none default. And all it does is use those two, that accent colors we looked at earlier. But I don't like to style buttons in the modules and have to do every single one of them. I like to do them here. And so your websites have been set up that way. And basically what I've said here, I want this custom button styling, and I want this color to be white, which is actually the words in both cases. When I hover, I want the words to be white, and when I'm not hovering, I want the link to be words to be white. Then I want the background color to be gold, and you can see that it is, and then when I hover, I want it to turn green. So that's every button on the website, and then currently the only buttons we're using at this time for any of the True 32 sites is we have one on the contact page and this one takes you to that contact form on the contact page. So this is the font that is being used on that button right now. Again, you could override it in this module, but I don't suggest doing that because you can change it for every button on the whole site from here if you don't override it. If you override it, you have to go to every single module. And then we've got a font weight of normal, and again it's Nucha, so it only has one font weight. Then the font weight of 16, if you wanted it bigger you could do that. Then the line height. Text transform, all it does is either make it all caps, all uppercase, or all lowercase. So, and some fonts are different and capitalized and uppercase, so you have to know what your font is going to do. And then I've said I want a border, and you can see that little white border around the edge. I've said I want a border, and as soon as I say that, I get these extra features. Now, if I do it in the module, I can actually control it on each of the 4 sides. I can say how big it is for each of the 4 sides, and I can say how big the radius is, but I don't know where the advantage on that is. A button would look silly if it had a 2 pixel radius on the top and a 4 pixel radius on the bottom kind of thing. So we're just saying we want a 1 pixel border all the way around, and we want a radius of 6 in all of these corners rather than it being square. And if we go to our contact page, we'll see our other button, and if you had a dozen buttons, they would all be styled correctly. You can see it does the exact same thing. Now, being on that white background, it's a little harder to see the white border, but we can see the white words and the teal and the gold. And that's it for the buttons. Again, I do like to use this custom buttons as opposed to leaving this off and then having to style them each one individually in the box. Again, all they'll use if you do that is just the primary color and the secondary color back up here on these accent colors. Just use these 2 colors, and it would be square. It won't have any kind of border or anything. But again, you can do it in the module. And then social links. I'm not using this right now because I'm not a big fan of Jetpack, and Jetpack is a plugin that Automatic, the company that makes WordPress websites and all the core code and all of that, has, but it just has a lot of weight with it and it slows your website down. So, but it utilizes these. If you put your website addresses in here and you have Jetpack installed, then you'll have a widget that you can just slide anywhere you want, and then all your icons will be there. You won't have to do all that code that I had to do in the absence of that. But what I've done is a lot lighter weight. That code is the only thing that controls those. I don't have a plugin that does a dozen other things that I may or may not want it to do. And so I don't use this area but you're welcome to install Jetpack and then use these and use that widget in your footer if you want to. But you can use the widgets in a lot of different places, in the header and the footer, wherever you want to use them. Okay, so we've got general. Now let's go to header, and we're not using the top bar. None of the True32 sites are. You could, but basically it's just, if you said I want 1 column or 2 column, it's just like that footer at the very bottom, just a little thin bar that gets up here above the header. And typically if people use it, they'll come in here and style it, and here they'll choose they want a 1 column and put some text up there. And so usually it's just like your company name or something. It's not really valuable. Maybe you could think of a reason for it, but we're not using it right now, and so there's not a lot. And I do go ahead and set all the styling in case somebody does decide to use it to mimic whatever we're doing everywhere else. Here's the header layout. Right now we have the navigation over here on the right, and you see we have some options here. We could say we want it at the bottom, or on the left, centered, inline logo, all, we can do all of these different things, but right now we just have it on the right. And we have a fixed header that is a fade-in header, as opposed to disabled, shrink, or fixed. So those are your options. And then we've said we don't want the logo to get too big. Now, if you put a great big logo up here, it's going to push your logo down. This is basically saying the maximum height of the logo, but if it's a big file and it's rectangular, it'll still hold it to this 46, but as soon as it becomes square, it can't do that anymore. So, be careful about that. You want to make your logos more of a rectangle than a square. And then we got our header style, and here we're just saying, if we had text up here. Now this is an image, so that's not text, so none of this is controlling it. I'm matching it, I've matched it to it, but this is not text, and this is not text either. This is part of the navigation. I've matched it to it in case you do add some text up there, and I don't have an image, I've just got a white background. Well, let's see here real quick. Go to King. I think I might have showed this. We had one of the websites that the cabinet maker's wife is a graphic designer by education, so you can see she's gone to that dark background, and everything's the same. This is the same template, but she's just styled it a little differently here and added some additional features and colors, but it's the same thing and controlled the same way, exact same way. So we've got a white background here, primarily because a lot of you guys don't have a logo that has a transparent background, and your logo has a white background, so I kind of have to stay with a white background. So that's what I do, is set this to white and then set these colors and use no image. But you could put an image if you wanted to. If you wanted this to be wood grain or leather looking or something like that, you could use an image as your background, as long as your logo has a transparent background and looks good on that texture or image. Then your header logo, and you want to load both of these. I think I've already said that in a previous when I talked about the header, but you want to load both of these for that. And then the navigation layout is basically how is this navigation going to work, and we basically said here that we want the navigation search icon enabled, so that's the little hourglass over here. And we've said that we want a menu button when we're toggling between a small phone device and computer, and responsive breakpoints here. Again, you don't need to mess with these things typically, but you have all these options, and if you want to play with them, feel free to do that. Drop down versus a fly out and all this stuff is all available. Again, some of this, when it says responsive, is controlling the phones and tablets. Otherwise, it's controlling what we're seeing up here. And this is saying if you wanted to spread these out a little bit, the more you have, the tighter you want to get them, the less you have, the more space you might want to add between them. And this is just 9 pixels right now. So that controls that navigation area, and then this styles it. So again, colors, that it's enabled, the font weight, the font size for this navigation area right here. And so we see that we have this burgundy and gold. Then we have our content. So our content would be, when we're on one of these pages that has the wood grain background, this center area is the content. So when we're looking at that content area, the background for it is basically just set to that really, really light gray. Again, we're using CSS to control that wood grain, and we'll talk about that in the CSS video. And then we're not using blogs for anybody's website, so I'm not going to go through that. We're not using, you don't have to worry about this archive stuff or the posts, because again, we're not using a blog. And I don't have anybody that has a web store right now. I have one on one of my websites for myself. And then Lightbox, all it is just enabled, and that's what works in your galleries. When you click on the thumbnail in a gallery, this Lightbox is what pops up, and it's a plugin. the food plugin. Then the footer, we went over the footer in the last video, so we won't go over that again. And then the widgets. So this is the secondary way of getting to those widgets. So if we went to column 1, and we see here in column 1 we have the 2 things we saw, but you see I can't bring anything. I can come in here with the plus button and bring something in, but I don't get that nice graph interface where I can slide things around and all that. I'm kind of restricted here, and this is the newer way, and so probably someday they'll deprecate the way that I did it, and we'll have to come here and do all of that work. What the customizer is where they want everything that you're doing to end up, but right now there's just not as many features here, so I like to work in go to the dashboard, appearances, and then customize and work from there. So that's those widgets we went through. Code you don't have to worry about. We don't use anything other than the head code, and the head code is basically some Google stuff, and then your fonts. If you want to use odd fonts, you do need to go to the Google fonts, learn a little bit about that. Right now we have included this Amatic and the Kalam and Frederica and the Nucha that we're using on this website. And a lot of web fonts are included in the template or in the themes, but if they're not, you have to bring them in here, or they won't display properly when you're on a browser that doesn't have that font built in. So again, that's probably more advanced, and you probably need to work with me if you want to do that, unless you've learned a lot about this stuff. And in settings, this is your site identity. We don't fill this in, but it is used if you use that top bar that we don't use. So just in case somebody turns that on, I'll leave this blank. And then this tagline is never seen anywhere. So it's just kind of like a meta thing that can be searched. So, and that's what we all do. So that's why that's there. Again, you'd never go there again once you've done it. Menus, again, I like to control that from the appearance area. Here we don't have as many features, but there's our menu. And if we click on it, we can see the same thing we would see in the menu area. We can add, we can reorder. So it works, but you typically wouldn't do it from here in the customizer. And then we're going to cover this in our next video. And then this export import, I keep the plugin that controls this turned off. I need this every now and then, but you should not. Typically you're not going to be bringing in whole folders of pictures. If you decide you want to get that sophisticated, certainly reach out to me and we'll do some online training. Again, that's $50 an hour for me doing work for you or training you one-on-one. But this is used to bring things into the website in bulk, as opposed to normally when you're doing like a kitchen, you're still kind of doing it in bulk, because you're going to go to the folder where all those pictures are and you're going to select all of them and say upload them. But I'm going to go select a folder that has a dozen folders in it and dozens of pictures in each folder by using this feature. That's it for this video on editing elements with the customizer of our website. Next we will look at editing the additional CSS element of the customizer. Thanks for watching.